Hello, Namaskar. Welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all knows, Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To subscribe to this channel, all you have to do is to press the red button on your screen. Subscription is, of course, completely free. Would also appreciate if you could like this video and share this video with your friends. Okay, why is Europe behaving like a brat child? Now, why do I say that? Look, we have this image of Europe, at least of a Europe when I was growing up, Europe as a place of great beauty, of excellence, of arts and literature, sculpture, a place of intellectual thought. Some of the greatest intellectual thought in the world has emerged from Europe. Also, a place of great technological innovation, and also a place of social harmony to that extent, where different communities have lived with each other. That was the image of Europe as we were growing up. And today, whether we like it or not, Europe has perceptibly declined to the point where it has almost become like a petulant child, a brash kid who's making demands, who is sulking, who is angry, as it was shown during the Munich Security Conference, which, of course, was taking place in Munich only a few days back. The decline of Europe, if one has to see the decline of Europe, then it was in a certain sense, symbolize at what really was happening at that Munich Security Conference. So let me give you a little bit in a snapshot what really was happening at the Munich Security Conference, and then I'll give you my reasons why Europe is declining so fast. The fundamental three or four important reasons why the decline of Europe has accelerated. But first, the Munich Security Conference. If there is one particular image that stands out in your mind of the Munich Security Conference, then it is that of the chairman of the Munich Security Conference. I think the gentleman, his name is Christoph Hugeson. And at some point, he broke down. He was actually crying. And everybody stood up to applaud the man. He was crying in reaction to what the Vice President of the United States, the speech which Vance had made only some time back, he was crying in response to that. It was a breakdown. It was almost like a child who was crying. And everybody in the audience stood up to clap him. And what was he crying about? He was crying about because of the helplessness of Europe in the present situation where the Russians and the Americans now are engaged in direct one-to-one talks in Saudi Arabia, and Europe has been completely left out. Europe is out in the cold. They are not involved in these talks. They might be involved later at a later stage, but at the present, when the groundwork is being laid for these Russia-American talks, the Europeans have been kept out. And the chairman of the Munich Security Council, he was crying about that, almost like a child. And why has Europe been reduced to a child? Because of the decision making processes, because of the absolutely bizarre manner in which Europeans are going about dealing and talking about and giving their pronouncements on a daily basis about the Ukraine situation, about what some people call Project Ukraine. The obsession with Ukraine, the obsession to keep the war going, actually, to a certain extent, the obsession to not go for peace as the Americans are doing now. They want peace they want peace to prevail in Ukraine. And the Europeans are completely, in a certain sense, opposed to it, coming with all kinds of funny, flimsy, bizarre demands, requests. As I said, Europe collectively, and when I'm talking of Europe, which European states, I'm basically talking of the powerhouses of Europe like France, Germany, United Kingdom, the Baltic states, Poland, all these countries. Leave aside, for instance, Hungary and Serbia and a couple of other countries, and Turkey, which is taking a bit of a neutral stance. But these important countries, they're all one and all, they are supporting Project Ukraine. They somehow want, in a certain sense, the war to continue. And it begs the question, why do they want that? And look at the way they are reacting to the Americans as I said, like a child, a brash a kid who has been denied toffee, a kid who, who reacts with anger, with disdains, with petulance, a kid who's thrashing around, who's sulking. All these things the Europeans are doing. Look at the media commentary, which is coming on a daily basis on news channels, in the media, the pronouncements of the top political leadership. Look at there was this article by the United Kingdom Premier I think it was in the Guardian or the Daily Telegraph, one of the newspapers, where he's actually advocating that Ukraine has to be eventually brought into NATO, where both the Americans have categorically ruled that possibility out completely, but he's sticking to that. And he's talking that he's prepared to send his troops, British troops, to Ukraine for so called peacekeeping or whatever, when the reality really is that the total troop strength of the United Kingdom actually fills up one football stadium. That's it. And recently, polls and opinion polls in the United Kingdom have been saying that people are absolutely opposed to their boys going to Ukraine, whether for peacekeeping or whether to enforce whatever ceasefire is brought about. So on a daily basis, the European leadership is now completely under a cloud, as I said, behaving like a brash kid. And let's now then talk about the fact that why are they doing all this? What is impelling them to do this? Why are they not on the side of peace? Why don't they want to give peace a chance in the European mainland, where peace somehow comes between Russia and Ukraine? The world, is so sick of this problem, and it finally leaves this problem behind. And because there are hundreds of other things for the world to look at, to do, and we move on. But no, the Europeans just are clutching. It's almost like they want this state of affairs to continue ad nauseum. Why do they want to do that? And I'm going to talk about three or four important reasons why things have gone so horribly wrong for Europeans. And those effects are being felt in other parts of the world also. In fact, our foreign minister, Jaishankar, was also there at the Munich Security Conference, and he made some very telling remarks against the Europeans. I will dovetail what he said with some of the important salient points which I'm going to make now. But first, let's start with the first important thing about this Ukraine obsession. Why is this? Why is Europe so obsessed with Ukraine? The basic premise, which they keep saying, is that Russia has to be stopped at all costs. Russia has to be defeated, or rather, Russia has to be almost broken up, because of the singular fact that Russia could be advancing into these main states in Europe. It could be threatening the security or the borders of these of European countries. And that begs a simple question: where is the empirical proof that something like this has happened in the recent past? Has Russia, besides, of course, Ukraine, and I'll talk of the Ukraine situation also, has Russia made moves against France or Germany or the United Kingdom or Poland for that matter, or even the Baltic states for that matter, or Finland or all these Scandinavian countries? Has Russia tried to transgress into their territories? Has Russia done something which would elicit this kind of a response? And the simple answer is no, nothing of that sort has been done. And therefore, why are you conjuring up an existential threat when none exists in the first place? And let's talk of Ukraine. Of course, the Russians have invaded Ukraine, and to that extent, yes, has been a wrong thing. But from their point of view, they have a certain, at least they believe there was certain justification, because they believe that Ukraine is too close to them. Ukraine is just like, it's like, I always give this my favorite example. It's like for us in India, it's like Delhi, Gurgaon. It's that close to them. And they say, if, for instance, a lot of commentators say that if the Americans can never tolerate that Mexico, for instance, would ever go nuclear, then why should the Russians tolerate that Ukraine would go nuclear? Weapons would be installed there. It would become a NATO country, and it would threaten the very sovereignty or the very territorial integrity of Russia. I mean, that's a Russian point of view, but one can accept it or not. But Project Ukraine has been, this edifice has been this entire opposition of the entire Western alliance has been built on the premise that the sovereignty of the European states would be threatened, where actually no empirical proof like that exists at all. And therefore, it begs a question that why are they doing this? And I'll answer that question a little later. But that's the first part. Keep that in mind. Number two, democracy. Let's talk of democracy because European leaders are very, very fond of talking about democracy, especially democracy in other countries. Democracy, as they keep talking about in Russia, democracy, especially in India. They keep saying that there's a kind of a flawed democracy in India. And this is what the Foreign Minister Jaishankar, when he was at the Munich Security Conference, he was talking about. He says that even if one tenth of the things which European ministers do, and if India did all of that in Europe, then there would be such a hue and cry about the whole thing. They get away with all these things, little realizing that what they are saying, the kind of implication is had, because the short point being that we are always in other parts of the world, in the global south, and India and other countries are criticized for an imperfect democracy. And look what is happening today. Democracy actually is coming under a cloud in Europe. In the United Kingdom, there have been crackdowns, a lot of people say, on free speech, in the guise of, oh, these are all far right people, and therefore there has been a massive crackdown. In Romania, elections have been cancelled by the courts, and a lot of people say that there are these liberal left judges aligned with the same philosophy as the political leadership, which are cancelling these elections. How come elections were cancelled in Romania? In Germany, now there is talk that the new far right party, which is, I think it's AFD, it's gaining so much of popularity that it might not be allowed to take part in the election. There is even talk about that. And the simple point really being that within Europe itself, democratic essentials are under threat, which is what the Vice President of the United States was talking about when he said that democracy is actually coming under a threat in Europe. And he actually used the word that the old communist commissars, he used the word Vance, and there's a decline. They are now prevalent in Europe, and there's decline of free speech in Europe. This is the Vice President of the United States who's talking about that. And this is what we have been saying. Our foreign minister said the same thing at the Munich Security Conference. Nobody in Europe was, of course, listening, but now they're all setting up and taking notice. They have to, because the United States now is speaking this particular language. And therefore, when bodies like, and I'll tell you the name of this body, which is called the Democracy Index by the Economist Group of the United Kingdom. The Economist is, of course, that magazine, which is, of course, completely anti-Indian. Everybody knows about that. And they have categorized democracies in the world in four different parts. According to them, that there are full democracies. Number two, there are flawed democracies. Number three, there are hybrid regimes. And number four, there are authoritarian regimes. And guess what? They have categorized India, this democracy index by the Economist Group, India into a hybrid regime. And they have placed it bottom way down on the index, some 80th, 85th or something, or whatever number. It's even lower, I think. And the nerve of it, you would say, the complete outrageousness of what they are talking about. India, to my mind, has problems, certainly, but it is one of the most vibrant democracies in the world. One of the most vibrant. And when you look at what's happening in Europe today, at the democratic traditions which they have, at the democratic vein of the democratic impulse in Europe, and what is happening today, and then you wonder, this is a complete hypocrisy of their entire talk of democracy when it's now becoming absolutely clear that these leftist liberal regimes in Europe, in the main states, they want to hold on to power at any cost. And the moment a threat emerges from the people, whether it's the form of right wing parties or, as they are very fond of saying, far right parties, or a lot of media commentators say Nazi inspired parties. Like, for instance, they call the main party in India as a Hindu nationalist party. This categorization of people without even thinking what it means, this is what the Europeans are up to now. And therefore, this democracy, where democracy really means that democracy that only left liberal regimes can be in power in Europe. That is one of the big reasons behind this project Ukraine, and why the Europeans are behaving the way they are behaving. That's the second part. Number three is the cultural part. There is a cultural element involved in this entire hypocrisy. And what is the cultural part is that religion is obviously completely on a decline in Europe. That's very obvious. And in its place, what is emerging is, which obviously was also emerging during Biden's America, that is the rise of things like transgenderism, the rise of alternative genders, the breakup of the family system. For instance, just to give an example, the NHS, the of Great Britain, they, on a form, when you fill up the NHS form, I believe that they say that they choose one of the following genders, which gender you are. And it's not two genders or even three, it's 17 genders you can choose from. That is to the extent which the Europeans or the British have gone. Dysphoria and all these other factors. And and just to give another very interesting example, when the Olympics were happening in Paris, and if you remember the opening show, then there was this entire transgender act, which was shocking, and it outraged so many sections in the world. Well, the cultural aspect is also very important, because this is the new kind of culture which is accommodated, which is encouraged in the left liberal regimes of Europe. The culture of the family, which is kind of poo-pooed or which is not given importance. The looking down upon terms like nationalism. Well, if you have no national, then you have to pay a price for that, as is Europe is paying right now. Today, nobody wants to fight. They can just talk. There's talk of creating this great European army, which the president of Ukraine has given a call for. But how will you do that? Unless you don't have a nationalistic impulse in your country, why will people bandy around some great European army? The contradictions which are emerging, which are emerging day in and day out of the European thought and talk, I would say, those are mind boggling, really. And therefore, the cultural aspect is another aspect why Europe behaves the way it is behaving. And finally, the very important reason also, which is now influencing their thinking, is this entire issue of Islamicization and migration, which are interlinked, I would say, because a lot of the migrants, both legal and illegal, which are now coming into Europe, really are from Islamic countries, and they just can't handle it. See, at one level, there is this hypersensitivity where anything which is Islamist is protected, it is given cover, it is shielded by these left liberal regimes, and illegal migration to that extent has been encouraged in country after country till now. At least some of them are waking up to find out that it is completely out of control in these countries. But this is again a very big factor. And what they are trying to do is that this sense of division, where they say that, yeah, Islamization is fine, but Hindutva is wrong, for instance, in countries like India. That is the talk, that is a narrative in the campuses, in the colleges, in the political elite of Europe. These are the reasons why Europe today is not only declining, but it behaves the way it behaves. It behaves like a petulant child. And therefore, in summation, one has to ask the question that what we understand the reasons, but why are the Europeans still doing that? And the reason for that is very simple. It is because the European elite, they have always thrived with the protection and the protective umbrella of the Americans. But now, with the Americans under a new leadership, has all but completely said that they are going their way. They are not saying that they're cutting their ties with Europe, but they are saying that there will be independent thinking. They will be revisit a lot of the old practices and customs which bound America with Europe. And therefore, the European elite, and when I talk of the European elite, who are they? They are, of course, the polity, the political leadership. They are the media. They are the think tanks. They are the NGOs. They are the academics. All of them are extremely nervous that the American umbrella is being taken away, is being taken off, so that protective cover of both wealth and the protective cover of the strength of America is being taken off. Suddenly they are being exposed. And all these policies which I've listed out, these 4 or 5 important policies which the Europeans are following today, will suddenly come up in the glare. They will be exposed because till now the Biden administration in America was protecting them. It was giving that umbrella or that cover so everything was hunky dory. But now that cover has been taken off. America doesn't want to be like that any longer. They don't want these policies under the new administration. They don't want to give a cover certainly of these policies. Therefore, the European elite is very, very afraid of being exposed, and therefore it wants to perpetuate project Ukraine to continue the old ways because because as they say, when war continues, then there is a sense of alarm, there is a sense of insecurity, there is a sense of bringing together people. This is what the elites do when war continues. But if peace descends, then in peace, then the true light of the day emerges, which nobody wants. The elite certainly don't want. And that is the single biggest reason that they are opposed to all these peace talks. They are opposed to peace breaking out, especially between America and Russia. And they want the war to continue in Ukraine. They want Project Ukraine to continue. This is the single biggest reason that let the old order prevail. Let that cover of America somehow be there so that all the things which they have done, they are not exposed and they come out on the surface. This is the game, really. That is what is really going on. And end of the day, we're only left with images of, as I said, images which are it doesn't even make you smirk. It doesn't make you laugh. It makes you wonder when the chairman of the Munich Security Council, Christoph Hughes, and people like him, senior people, are crying on stage. Images of a child who has been denied a toy, a child who has been denied goodies from a sweet shop. It's that kind of an image which sticks in your mind that this is now the extent to which the Europeans have descended to. They have become petulant brat kids where their joy, their pleasures have been taken out of their hands and they have left to face the truth. So, on this note, I come to the end of this particular podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this podcast. And as I keep saying, if you like the CAA show, then do subscribe to it. Press the red button on your screen. And of course, subscription is free. And therefore, on this note, it's goodbye and cheers till next time.